Hey guys, what's up? This is Let's Ride USA, and today we're going to be talking about the importance of tools. So when you start to get into dirt biking and start to acquire various motorcycle fun machines, you're going to need to get you some tools. If you go check out the last New Rider series, you'll see I talked about the importance of maintenance. Well, to do this maintenance, you're going to need the proper tools. So here are some of the basic tools you're going to need when you get into dirt biking. So one of the first things you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go out and get yourself a good socket set. I find that I use sockets more than any other tool in this entire toolbox, just because they're very easy to use and you can get pretty much any bolt off on a bike with one of these. Even though this is a pretty small set and has a limited supply of sockets, it seems to work just fine for me, although I do hope to upgrade to a more advanced set in the future. So if you do have the option, I would upgrade right off the bat and just get a good socket set. When dealing with a socket set, probably the best thing you can do is keep everything in order. Right now, as you can probably tell, I don't have everything in order, but I will be putting it into order very shortly. The next thing you're going to want, and as silly as it sounds, are cups. The reason I recommend cups is because, as you can see right now, I'm doing carburetor work, and I like to keep all the bolts and other parts in these cups. And then what I also like to do, depending on the type of maintenance I'm doing, is use a marker to label the cups, so that way you know what parts go to what section, and putting everything back together is a breeze. Alright, let's take a look. What's the next tool we're going to want to use? Screwdrivers are a very basic tool and come in handy a lot when riding dirt bikes. You want to get a couple of different versions. Of course, you want your basic Phillips head and flatheads, but also having different sizes also come in handy, and I find to be very useful. Besides having sockets, using just your basic wrenches are also very vital to doing any type of maintenance. Although using socket wrenches I feel are a lot easier than using a standard wrench, there comes times where a socket just isn't good enough and you're going to want a real wrench. I find that using regular wrenches over socket wrenches work best, especially when dealing with taking off axle bolts, just because they're easier to get on and you also have a little bit more leverage when taking the bolt off. As you can see, I got a variety of different size wrenches. Also have got a universal wrench, which also comes in handy a lot. However, I do not recommend using this often. This is pretty much only used in emergencies. I find it is much better to take the extra time and find the exact size wrench, just because it's a lot more efficient and a little bit more professional. Alright, moving to the next drawer. Let's see what we got. Pliers. I don't really use these a whole lot, but I picked these up not too long ago and I've been using them in a couple situations, and pliers are just a pretty good thing to have. They're also a nice emergency tool to take out with you in the trail just in case. Also in this drawer we have deep sockets. These are pretty good for using, taking out spark plugs. Definitely recommend getting a set of these. Even if you don't have to get a whole set. As you can see, I only have 2 deep sockets, but they're just the correct size for the spark plugs that I need. In here we got a little bit more specialty tools. These are more paint stuff, don't really need to use them for dirt biking. But we have a seal mate, which is used for fixing fork seals. And then also having a chain breaker is very useful for either shortening the chain or if you're installing a new chain. Alright, this drawer is a little bit messy, but of course we have another big screwdriver. Also have a kickstand, don't really need this. But I have a ruler I find is pretty good for measuring stuff because, hey, that's what a ruler is for. But I use this mostly for measuring chain slack. I go by exactly what the manual says. I know for my 250 it recommends about 2.1 inches of slack. So I go right up to the bike, measure it out, and make sure I got the perfect amount of chain slack. Another important tool to have is some blue Loctite. You actually typically don't use this too often. I've only used this with changing sprockets because you really want to Loctite those sprockets down. This is just another little tool that I found pretty useful and I've used once or twice before. So that pretty much covers just the basic tools, but now we're going to moving on to more of the specialty items that you're going to want for riding a dirt bike. Now we got some good stuff in here. WD-40, just universal tool, gotta have. I also like having a pair of work gloves around. I find this works best, especially when changing oil. It gets pretty messy. And these also protect you from burning your hands on the hot oil, so I would definitely recommend picking a pair of these up. Rags, also important. I know I said we were going to move on to the specialty tools, and these are still kind of the basic stuff, but don't worry, we'll get there. Chain wax is great to have around. This was actually probably the first, I guess, dirt bike related tool that I picked up when I first got my XR100. Just because you got to make sure that chain is lubricated, and it is vital to your machine's performance. In here we got some Bel-Ray waterproof grease. This comes in handy when sliding in and out axles makes taking them out a lot easier, and also it's just good to grease stuff up once in a while. Alright, so we're done with this section. Let's move on to the other part of the garage and see what we got. Another thing you're going to want to keep around is a manual. I find that I use this very often for just about any type of maintenance. I always like to do everything by the book, so having a manual on hand is very useful. Final last thing I would recommend to have in a toolbox would be a spare parts kit. Right here, I've got a spare carburetor and I've got the stock carburetor. Right now I'm using the spare carb to fix up the stock carb because I'm hoping that some of the parts on this should work and fix up the problem on this carburetor. Usually I wouldn't keep two carburetors around, but some of the things I would keep in a spare parts kit would be things like extra master links, O-rings, extra nuts and bolts. Definitely spare air filters are extremely important to have. That way when one gets dirty, you got a spare one and you can just throw it in and keep going, and then when you get a chance, clean up the dirty one, and then you got another air filter right on hand. When dealing with spare parts though, it's definitely more so catered to your specific needs and also the type of bike you have. So just figure out what are some of the spare parts you would like to have around, and usually they're relatively cheap, so that's pretty good. That's going to be it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you found it informative. I know this wasn't as exciting as some of our normal videos, but I thought this was a pretty important video to upload to the channel, especially to the new rider series. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and as always, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.